So let's go. So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Here in Berlin is good morning. And welcome to this webinar. My name is Javier Pérez Fernández. I work as Agile 42 coach trainer in Agile 42 here in Agile 42 headquarters in Berlin. I'm not German. Originally, I'm from Madrid, from Spain, so please enjoy my accent. And yeah, I came here 8 years ago because of the European crisis economic, and I stay here for a while. I've been working for Agile 42 already for years. Yeah, today together with me, we've got Lena Natus from Divimove, Michèle Twomey from Agile 42. Also my colleague, also Agile coach and Agile trainer. Before starting, this webinar is the second webinar of the series of organic agility webinars. Yeah, and and today's topic we'll talk about how sense-making, how a sense-making framework as Cynefin can support situational decisions making. And yeah, how did it concretely at Divimove in the Human Resources Department. Michèle, Lena, and myself, we were working together at Divimove for 3 months, I think. Well, right now, I don't remember exactly the length. And yeah, we would like to share a bit our experience there, concretely in the Human Resources Department. So please, feel free to post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature. Yeah, I will be taking notes of them, and we will address them towards the end of the webinar. Having said that, yeah, let's start. Please, Michèle, if you want to take over, I go to the background.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're living in exciting times. I'd like to share my screen so that we can go through a brief intro of the organic agility approach. So what is organic agility? In a nutshell, it's basically not another scaling framework, but rather it's a novel approach which is based on complexity thinking rather than systems thinking. So you'll see that this is not a model, but rather it provides a scaffolding for organizations to drive change and to evolve as a resilient organization. You'll see in this diagram from Andrea that it consists of 3 components. The first component is a leadership framework, and this is based on sense-making and situational leadership. The second component are 5 organizational design principles. And today we'll be going into one of those, which is the second design principle, which is really important in the scaffolding, and that is situational decision-making. And the third component is looking at supporting tools. And these are a variety of different tools. Our tools that we provide are mostly real-time measurement tools. So why is organic agility important? As Andrea Tomasini, our founder and thought leader, mentioned in the first part of this series of webinars, organic agility came out of 7 years of experience in supporting cultural transitions in organizations that are seeking higher levels of resilience and also seeking more agility. So this approach is not just some theoretical approach, but it's really based on 7 years worth of real case studies and observations. And we reached out to the complexity community, the leadership community. And with our observations, we jointly came to the conclusion that a shift in metaphor was important. And this shift in metaphor is represented in the next slide, which you'll see is really from a mechanical metaphor visualized here by a machine, which is very fixed and focused on efficiency, to an organic metaphor, which is relating to a living entity and having characteristics of an organism. So something like an ecosystem or a network of people, which is adaptive and thereby more focused on effectiveness. So why is this important? It's really, this is particularly important when we think about our current situation where a new coronavirus has led to disruption globally. And it's important because a mechanical entity tends to be fragile and unable to adapt to change rapidly, whereas something which is more organic and living tends to be far more responsive and able to adapt very quickly to changes by co-evolving, for example, with the environment around it, and therefore it's far more resilient. So shifting the metaphor means essentially that the overall strategy of the organization will shift from, for example, preventing failures from happening to recovering from failure as fast as possible. And this has deep implications on culture and on developing people's behavior and ownership. So that's a brief introduction to the approach of organic agility. I'd like to hand over to Lena so we can have a brief introduction of just Lena as well as Divimove and why you decided to approach us and for us to work together.
Yes, hello everyone. So Divimove is a European's leading digital studio right now in social media. We have a huge artist network, and we produce our own social media productions. So we have channels for which we produce. We work with influencers. So very big market there, and we belong to RTL and then to Bertelsmann, and we are placed in 10 markets right now and have offices all over Europe. Our headquarters are in Berlin, and we went through a lot of mergers. So last year, I joined last year in April, and when I joined we were 90 people. Right now we're 250 people. And when I joined, Divimove had just merged with UFA-X, which was a studio from UFA, but really focused on the social media, and a lab more kind of producing their own work. And they have joined with Divimove and took over the name Divimove. And then within the last year, the United Screens from the Nordics, and just recently Tube One from Cologne, also an artist network and influencer management. They do influencer management as well. And RTL MCN have also merged with us. So we were facing many different companies coming together for one. And all of these companies had worked before successfully on their own, sometimes 5 years, and had their own culture. So the difficulties we were facing were really to bring all these people together and become something new. And that's why we approached Agile 42 to help us along the process. Yes.
Okay, at this point, maybe we can then have a look at introducing the second principle, which is situational decision-making. And here we find the framework that was developed by Dave Snowden very helpful, and we really appreciate the use of this, where we have different systems being represented. And if we have a look at the right-hand side, we have the ordered systems where problems are either clear or they are complicated. So they may be complicated, but there is still a clear cause and effect relationship. The outcomes are predictable, and things are stable or unchanging. So in this domain, it's really where experts thrive, the complicated domain. The clear domain, we sense, categorize, respond. We have fixed constraints and best practices. Things like checklists where it's very clear what needs to be done. In the complicated domain, we sense, analyze, and respond, and we have governing constraints that lead to good practices. But as we move to the left side of Cynefin, this sense-making framework, which enables us to make sense of a situation in order to act or to decide, we find that there's the complex system or the complex domain. And here we probe, sense, respond. So on the right-hand side, since these are predictable problems, we are able to use defined approaches and methods to control and control the flow of work. And these are known as defined process control methods. And we recall here the mechanical metaphor mentioned earlier on, whereas on the left-hand side, the complex domain, we really require that shift in metaphor to an organism where it's more adaptive and is able to respond. And here we probe, sense, respond, and have enabling constraints and exaptive practices. So bottom left-hand corner, you'll see is the chaotic domain. And here it's crucial to act, then sense, and then respond. Without acting, things will just get worse, and it's about survival often. So there are no effective constraints. But also here we have novel practices emerging, so there is possibility. In the center, we have, if we focus on the C, just ignoring the liminal version, which is the green and the A, we've got C for confused. So in the center, we have the confused domain where essentially it's about a situation where we're confused. We haven't quite determined which domain we are in. And it's important to then have the necessary conversations, dialogues, narrative exchanges to make sense of the situation in order to then act and decide. So we introduced the Cynefin framework in the engagement with Divimove, and Lena, myself, and Javi were doing quite a number of workshops to introduce this. And what we found interesting is the way in which people related to the sense-making framework, and some of the challenges were also to translate this framework into language that is sort of understandable and concrete and something that people can grasp and also experience. So maybe I can hand over to Lena again, or Javi, do you have any input at this point?
No, everything fine. Just Lena, if you want to move on.
Mm-hmm. So, Michèle, you wanted me to start explaining how we introduced the framework to Divimove.
Sure.
Yes. So, I mean, we did an assessment with Agile 42, and what we really found out is how to find a common language as well for all of these different teams, and also as there was some chaos, of course, after all these mergers. We were looking how we can enable our teams to act freely, where they can act freely and to be really autonomous and decide by themselves, but also to have some constraints. And we did this workshop in most of the teams, and for us it always was a starting point. So we started mostly with Agile 42 with a process, and then moved on, and along the way new things would evolve, new questions would come up, and for HR, as that's my team, we were really involved early, and also things now have changed, but I can start maybe how we started with the framework. So if you have all these categories, In the first session, you kind of think about, okay, where do different decisions we make belong to which area? Are they obvious? Are they complicated? Are they chaotic? And for example, here in the obvious domain, we have the signature rights, which you can see on the right bottom. So as we had all these different companies coming together, we also had to do a lot of new contracts, transitions, and all this. A lot of renegotiations with existing contracts with employees, and bringing different contracts together. And there, everything had to be signed by 2 people from our management, and they were often not there. So, and also on another topic, we work on 2 layers. So we have an administrative level of how we are built up as a company, but we always work project related. So we work with a lot of freelancers or people who just come in for one project. So it's really bureaucracy. And we were, of course, trying to avoid that. And we put the signature rights in the obvious domain, because we as HR thought, okay, we just need to have the right to sign for whatever we can to make things as easy as possible, because often we had management as a bottleneck. Now, it was a really good starting point. When we continued working with it, we could see, okay, there we can have the right. It's really obvious. It's our decision. Other parts, we need to have a more complex process. So that has really shifted, and we have an order and a structure where we all have the same language by now. Who has which signature rights, and how do we organize it to have it really clear and easy and not complicated? And it's actually the same. You see the benefits just next to it. And I'm starting with the 2 obvious things we put there. It was the first session we had. The benefits, as we went through the mergers, our team, our employees, they also felt uncertainty, and the benefits are a part to really bring a team together. What do we do together? They're an extra, which was really needed for us, but we have offices all over Europe. And when we did the first Cynefin workshop, we thought, okay, let's benefits. We just have to introduce them and just really quickly get them going, which we did then. But now along the process, we also realized that the benefits is a little bit more complex. It needs to be adapted to the local offices. I was in Paris in our office, and they said, we really love the urban sports club you introduced, but all of our all of our friends get food vouchers, and that would mean so much more for us. So it is to then take it from there and maybe reevaluate and move it into different domains. And it really helped us to start this whole thinking process and how we have it together. Also now we moved all into mobile office last Friday, and the benefits are changing again. We introduced a mobile gym, and I think because we started with this Cynefin process, we are quite aware of how we make decisions and why we decide quick or slower, and so I think it really helped us now also to be more flexible again, and to let go of maybe personal interests that even in the HR team we think, okay, yeah, but we really did all this work, we did all that, we introduced these benefits now, so now they need to stay. But we understood the complexity, because also if you move to the area where you say there is no way to predict the outcome, that was always connected a lot for us as HR with talking to employees, having human relations to people, and that plays into the benefits. So it helped us to have a clear understanding of what we're doing and to have a common language and not everybody speaks in their words, and like we found a common ground there.
So I think that's a key point that you mentioned now, is that it enabled a form of having a common language to look at these things. I recall there was also a challenge to get people together to take the time to actually sort of speak to each other and take the time to see what domain are we actually in. And I think that increased awareness of a situation is also the key aspect in this principle, is to look at what is required when it comes to situational decision making, because every situation is different and every situation requires a different way of dealing with it. And therefore, I thought it was amazing to see HR department then having these regular conversations and also making sense of situations that were initially potentially in the clear domain, where it seemed like there was a single right answer, but then actually there wasn't. I don't know if you can also mention the other example, Lena, where it was about signing rights.
I talked about the signing rights before, but what do you mean in particular?
So you mentioned that the signing rights were something where it was to put in constraints. So in the clear domain, it would be, so if it's a clear situation, one can essentially put in fixed constraints in order to then allow the work to flow. And you put those in place, and it improved the workflow. However, there were some situations that were not also clear, but rather more complicated or complex, and that required another conversation to then make sense of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, because I spoke before about that, but I can, yes, so we did put, for the signing rights, we really, so of course, if it's something from the Agentur für Arbeit, we sign it, it's not a question. Everything, what we made a list, what we could sign, or what our HR operations manager can sign, and where he can give permission on budgets and things like that. And there is another list which we have where we can't sign, or where it's really clear who's the responsible person. But actually, talking to you right now, I think that one of the really big benefits it was also to understand for our HR operations manager, okay, actually, I got really annoyed that I can't sign it all, but it actually makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's a great example of maybe situations that are more complicated, where you do need a particular person to give some insight and sign in this case. But it could also be a situation that is complicated, where certain experts need to be involved in the sense making and then deciding how to move forward and act. And that's an example of the governing constraint, which is then in the complicated domain.
Yes, and it also, because we really want a team who can decide, like all our teams should really move forward and not wait for other people. But after, for us, that was the place, but after all these mergers can also be other reasons. You also need the trust in the teams that they know what they're doing, because otherwise what started to happen for us was also that people were running in different directions, and that doesn't help either. If you're a really big company and you all have to work together. And this really, what it really helped within the HR team is understanding. So it comes organically now out of our team. We really, I don't need to explain too much. All team members understand where we're coming from and come with the suggestions, which are really, where I would bring the same suggestion. And so there it really helped. I'm just looking at.
So you're also saying that it built a lot of trust within your HR team, having these conversations, using the Cynefin framework to make sense of different situations. There was an understanding, a common understanding, which also helped build trust.
Yes, it helped to build trust, but it also helped to build trust with management. It helped to build trust with whoever leads the team too. I mean, on several levels, it just, a common language just really helps to move forward. And then to also, when we onboard someone new now, the structure is in place and we can still become much better. So, I mean, it's a constant moving thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember the way that you introduced or translated the Cynefin framework was with linear thinking and circular thinking. And I really appreciated that as well, just using different words to convey the thinking patterns that we sometimes fall into when a situation is complex, so requiring more circular thinking, to be falling back into linear thinking of it's clear, we all know, and actually maybe we don't. So that was quite interesting because I could see in the responses of the participants as well that they could relate to that. So interesting how the different exercises also made the framework very accessible to the people on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so yeah, that's it. The market we are in is social media, and all overall media is a super complex market. Plus, we have offices in all of these different countries, like in Amsterdam, Milan, Paris, Stockholm, and to get the change we wanted to, it takes time. Also, when we started the process with you, I mean, that's something where I can really see it doesn't work linear, it's complex. So we started with the Cynefin workshops, we did other things as well. And actually just last week and this week, we could really see how much it helped us, and that we had little seeds, we spread little seeds, and we were, another, I don't know if we have it on that, is home office. So we didn't dare to introduce home office yet. We always wanted it as a benefit. It's part of the benefits. And we were allowing home office within the team. So if people in my team would come and ask, can I do home office? I would always say yes, because we had a good relation, but there were also really new teams. And just as an overall, we didn't know how should we introduce it. And now we're all forced to do home office. And I think because we have made this groundwork, it's really working well. And we're really surprised how easily we adapted and how much common language and things. We're building new structures right now, which we wanted to implement a while ago, but right now we really need them. And so some things are moving really fast, and we can feel resilience within the team. And yeah, that's I would say to really understand what linear and complexity is, and that even a simple topic like signature rights has complex aspects. And to define them, to say, okay, this belongs there, this belongs there. We understand what we're talking about. It is attached to other things. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Can you recall any particular challenges that you had along the way, or maybe especially now where there is an expansion on the mergers?
Yes, we had. You mean with the Cynefin framework?
Yes.
Yes, we're constantly facing challenges. So in the beginning, a challenge was because everybody within themselves, we have a lot of creative people in our team. People have been working together longer in other company frames. So UFAX was working together for many years. They were successful in what they were doing. Divimove was a startup, completely different culture, successful in what they're doing. Tube One comes from another direction. And of course, it's human to try to defend what you have built up and what you've been doing. And especially if you know that within your structure, you move agile and you are flexible, but within the bigger picture of a much bigger company, these things, especially when a new partner comes in with another structure, these things don't work. And we, in the beginning, and still, it's sometimes hard to understand, why do we need to do this? I mean, I know what I'm doing, and I know this is complex. It's not, yeah, and that was hard, and to get people to take the time, as we're so busy. I think that was a huge challenge to make people understand that you really need time to reflect, and that the groundwork needs to be done, and every single employee needs to be taken on board there. So we did it, I think, in a complex way. We did it with the teams who wanted to do it, and you see the changes within these teams, and then the next teams, and that's also what you recommended us to do, and that was really a good way to go, because you can't, if people are too busy and don't take the time, it has to become creditly. So we started working with Agile 6 months ago, and I think we're still in the beginning, not in the beginning, but a lot of groundwork has been done, but it's an ongoing process, of course.
So you were saying that it's become quite a routine or a ritual to consider the Cynefin framework in situations so that it provides the necessary sense-making and insights in order to act or decide. I recall there were moments that...
Sorry, could you just repeat? You were gone for a second for me.
So I recall, I mean, you mentioned now that it's become fairly routine and also sort of a ritual for you as the HR department to use the Cynefin framework to make sense of situations in order to then decide and respond. I recall there were situations that also involved other departments, mm-hmm. where you then decided to have another Cynefin session together and a workshop to jointly look at the situation and make sense of it from different perspectives.
Yeah, so
we in those sessions.
Yeah, so we did it from different perspectives. So of course, our leadership team was one of the first teams we did this with as well. And then, for example, we have the headquarters in Berlin. So all finance, HR, a lot of operations, IT run via Berlin. And we were in Amsterdam together giving the workshop. And there was the topic that it wasn't easy for the people who were attached to the Berlin team. So we had a PR manager in Amsterdam who is in our team in Berlin. And she experienced, of course, you have your team, which you see every day, and you have a team in Berlin. And so we did like we took all the people who have, PR manager was just one example, but we took all the people who work very closely to Berlin in Amsterdam and did the Cynefin framework with them to see, okay, why do I feel in different certain moments like that? Where does it become complex for me because I am based in Amsterdam? Maybe the decision itself isn't so complex, but for me it becomes complex because I have a team here with needs. I have another team in Berlin with needs or rules or how they do things, and that really helped to understand. So we set up some things afterwards, like more regular calls. We've been more in contact, but already to do the framework already helped because it was opening the box and looking into it and discussing it and understanding that also on a personal level, you don't react. It's not strange what you feel. And it's not strange what the other person feels, and that really helped to make things easier.
Okay.
So, quite interesting. I don't know if you would like me also to start asking the questions that people have posted in the chat. I had one, but Michèle actually have asked it for me already. That it was about main challenges that it seemed you had a lot, and I can really remember many of them. Yeah, overall about people talking using the same language for referring to different things, not common language, and also difficulty to make people to sit down together and talk. Yeah, so they make the time. I remember this being quite painful. And also you talk about many different challenges. There is one question from Joao. He was asking a bit, I think it's related with this. He was asking about what were the major pains through the adoption of the process. And you mentioned that besides letting go the human resources control from management, what were other pains that you had through the adoption of the process?
Oh, I'm really sorry about my connection. The beginning of your question I couldn't hear. So you asked me what were the pain points we had with the process of introducing Cynefin into Divimove.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The audience already heard one of them, that it was okay for management letting go the human resources control. What other pains you had?
You mean specifically to HR department or to
well, in the question was mentioned HR department, but if you can recall other pains, feel free.
I'm thinking about.
So maybe.
Yes.
Maybe I can briefly just come in. The question as well is linked to some of the pains that Lena had mentioned with regards to the way things were done, right? And that in itself represented the culture, which is part of another series in another webinar that we'll also discuss, which is looking at how to actually measure culture or to make it explicit, and to, through real-time tracking of culture, see the shift as you start with things like introducing the Cynefin framework. But maybe you want to speak a little bit more about that adoption pain, Lena, which was the way Divimove, because of the nature of your work and the fact that there are many creative people, the culture was get on with it and do things, get busy.
Yes.
Reflect, where are we at and what is the current situation?
Yes, so I mean, all of our teams are really independent, motivated people, and they really care about their work as well. And that sometimes, if you then have another group of people who care in a different way, can lead to conflict. And that was also with Agile. We were all looking for things, okay, how can we improve? We knew if you go through that many mergers and if you grow that bigly, everybody is aware that you need to change things and that you need to look at it and how to go through this process as quickly and as good as possible. So the team knew that, and they were looking for solutions. And one of the pain points was that when we started working with you, there was maybe a secret hope that things would just, you come in, you tell us a few things, and it's done. and
that silver bullet.
Yeah, and that was a pain point, because it takes a bit of time. And if you're extremely busy and you have all these admin things which are going along through the mergers, which create a lot of extra time, but you have all your customers, you have, as an influencer manager, you are really there for your artist, and I mean, people are available in the evenings, artist managers. It's really a one-on-one relationship. And I remember we had an artist manager who was leading and also setting up like more exclusive contracts and things like that. And he had his 3 phones, and it was really hard for him to be present in these workshops, because his job is to be available all the time to the influencers, and to really understand, okay, how can I structure it? And if I communicate to them and say, look, for these he does that anyway for team meetings and things like that, but that was a huge point because a merge creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates fear. So I remember we had a session where we really talked about that, and we're in a similar situation right with what is happening with the coronavirus. There is uncertainty, and that always, we are all dealing with a bit of fear, and how do we stay calm, what's the right thing to do, and to take that moment. You can translate it to your personal life, and it's to come together as a team to make sense of what you do. Yeah, so that was a huge point to make people understand how it's needed.
Yeah, and from the engagement of also what we did in the teams, we literally looked at the decisions that needed to be made, where there was also challenging situations, and focused on those that were clear, and really started putting in some rigid constraints that enabled the work to flow in those clear situations.
Yeah.
Which was then allowing the team to also see how it can be beneficial to take some time to make sense of situations, and then moved on to also the complicated domain to put in constraints that allowed that work to flow. And even so, I think just introducing a framework, a sense-making framework, takes time. And it was a process of, I think the important thing when Joao asks about what were some of the pain points, is that people need to be able to relate to it and see, what is the value add for me in this?
Yes.
Why is this important for me? And I think that also comes through failure. So situations that went in maybe a different direction, where something was complex and it was treated as though it was clear, and then ended up being sort of really not a great situation, but learnings out of that, which then said, wow, it's important for us to actually sit down and just have a conversation and gain some common understanding of the situation. So that, I would say from my perspective, was the biggest pain point, is how to translate the framework in such a way that people can relate and see that this makes sense for me, or this is something of value to me, and I can translate my experiences as well. And that's where when we introduced it, we tried to also create the space for people to experience how this is valuable. So to actually sort of set yourself up in a room where you look at different situations and you place yourself on a spectrum of, is this clear and there's one single answer, or is this actually more complicated and we need to consult some experts, or is it complex where it's unpredictable? And
yeah,
I think that was helpful.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you. So now we have 2 people. They are actually asking the same question. Lena, well, maybe it's a question to be answered by you both. People are asking, okay, you said that the resilience improved, yeah? how are you measuring this? How is resilience capacity being measured, and how are you gathering the data? How can you say that the team is more resilient?
I mean, the first thing to measure is in the market how successful we are with our clients, and we have had a lot of. So we had one client. We've been in contact with him. It's a really big, huge project. Been in contact with him for a year. They finally signed. I mean, that's a success that we could improve, that we could not improve, that we could really show this client, okay, we're capable of doing and delivering even in difficult times. We can take care of your needs because we are set up. So that was, of course, how successful you are as a company is the biggest measurement, but that takes a bit of time to see, okay, what are the actual reasons that they lead to it. And if I just talk about the HR team, for me, a big measurement is that we recently had the performance talks, and like the employee I'm leading, she said that everything has changed within our department. She really, she does everything differently now. She has a lot of more capacity because recruitment was also a topic we had looked at in the Cynefin framework. And we have really changed our recruiting process. We have free time. We offered now, we wrote to management and said, look, actually our working student has some time. Can we help you? We can schedule all your performance talks. And that's a huge measurement for me, that we have really created space and organization within our team. Another measurement is that within our team, we had so many changes because we had people who were pregnant and left on maternity leave. And actually our HR team has completely, just one person at the moment is still there from last year, January, and we're 5 people. All has changed. And it wasn't only easy transitions. And we have the team, what we found out in the Cynefin framework was also, this is a complex situation. We need to take time. So we started to go for breakfast with our team meeting. And we also gave us a bit more time to talk privately between us because we were all really busy and the private aspect got a bit lost. But we as HR need that to deal with all the needs which are coming in. And we have a really good team energy now. And that wasn't like that in the beginning. And that's a measurement there as well. We haven't done any, like we do regular feedbacks and we ask employees, and we haven't measured the employee happiness right now. But within my team, I can really say that it has, like overall, we haven't measured it. We just have measured it in direct feedback sessions. So it is, of course, a bit through my eyes, but if somebody comes and says that from themselves, I think.
What you have measured is your culture. So you've made your culture explicit through the org scan, right?
Yes.
And that was the initial assessment which happened prior to this. We won't go into the details of how it all happens, but definitely there are measurements that are happening real time. And you are, I think, Lena, correct me if I'm wrong, planning on relooking the org scan to see how your culture is shifting. And that would also be an indicator of a shift into more resilience. Yeah,
looking at that, it's always, we also had a huge employee survey from RTL, and there's always, I mean, it's okay, when do we take the time? So we focus now on introducing the Cynefin workshops, and we're looking at the measurement again. And we also have a regular once a week feedback, and we're looking at that. But our focus, we mainly did the coachings in November and December. So we first wanted our team to take time, but it's a journey. It's like it all takes time.
I wanted to ask, have you seen, I think you mentioned it already, but the the improvement in workflow, because as you're working with Cynefin and you are understanding the context and responding more appropriately in that you are putting constraints in place that are helpful for the workflow. Have you seen any improvements in the workflows, some areas like operations being more productive?
Yes, I mean, people, if you don't know what you need, it's really hard to ask for it. So
yep.
I've seen a lot of improvements, and I mean, just with the recruitment process, we have restructured it to actually, because we changed to a tool, so we're saving time there, and we're changing it now so that our hiring managers have to spend less time on it, and also it's the whole process by making things, by talking about these points and these decisions with Cynefin, you make it transparent. This adapts to how you do your work. So we made the whole recruitment process transparent, so everybody now can see what our recruiter is communicating with the candidates. And before that, she had to communicate what she was communicating to the hiring managers. Now they can just check in, read the emails, because they have access. And that saves a lot of time. So these are workflows. By talking and making it transparent within your team, it's easier to then make it transparent to the whole company.
Right.
So,
yeah.
oh, sorry. No, I was just because suddenly came a couple of questions at the very, very end. And I think we have time for just one question more. So I will just ask the one that it came a bit before. Apologies for this. So there was a question about. Hold on, I need to find it now. It was about how can you relate? How can you make people relate to the Cynefin? What? How to translate Cynefin's language into concrete examples so that the people can relate to? Because Cynefin can be kind of abstract. How can you come with examples that people can relate to it?
I mean, so Michèle, you also had some good understanding examples. So when I started with the Cynefin framework on the first time, I would do it rather simple and not explain within our team. But maybe it was also because yeah. So we would start rather simple with simple examples. I don't know, Michèle, if you have something there.
Yeah, I think it's good to have examples. So for example, when explaining it, the one thing that I noticed, and Lena and myself were kind of also experimenting with this, how best to translate the framework. I think it's important to create that experience. So it's important for people to relate and to have an experience around it, but also that it relates to their context. And I know initially that was an important thing at Divimove, because of your context being as the way it is, media agency, and the kind of target groups that you have. It's important to translate it not only into your language, but also to make it tangible and experiential. And then it's to have other examples too. So in the clear domain, things like you would have something like an example of a checklist. So example would be, it's very clear when an aeroplane needs to take off, what the safety measures are that need to be checked and put in place. So there's a checklist that a pilot would go through in order to ensure that everything is according to safety standards before takeoff, right? This is just for takeoff. That's clear. That's the clear domain. So it's checklists. It's things that are very, very clear. And then you've got your complicated domain where you're not just having sort of a very clear domain of knowing what to do, but rather you need experts to analyze a situation. And here you might have a situation where you include experts that have gained experiences in this particular field to share their experiences. And as we said, everything on the right-hand side of Cynefin is the ordered system. And here Lena translated this in terms of linear thinking, because we know there's a strong cause-effect relationship and outcomes are predictable. So this is the terrain that we're all very familiar with and very comfortable with, and often also fall back into if we actually are not in that domain. So as we said, defined process control, where we define each step in a process, can be used on the right-hand side, and that's the ordered system. But on the left, when we go into complex, it's unpredictable. There is no clear cause-effect relationship. And so here we're looking at the intractable social problems in the world where you don't know what actually caused it and what are the outcomes going to be. And this is a very interesting domain, which Dave Snowden is continually evolving. And I was just thinking of the word crisis right now. We're in the complex domain. It's a crisis. It's a global crisis. However, if you look at the Chinese word crisis, it consists of two characters, images, and one is danger, the other one is possibility. So it's to look at the paradox in that, but that's going deeper into Cynefin, which we don't have time for now. But I think the important thing is to explore for your context. What is important that in terms of experiential space to create for people that are going to be engaging with Cynefin, and to use examples around that.
I could, if you want me, I have very quickly 3 examples for HR. It's really quick. So for us, obvious is the onboarding. It should run in the same way. Of course, there is the human interaction and how you introduce an employee, but still it's clear how the process is. You need a laptop, you need different things. So onboarding for us is obvious. Complicated is recruitment. It needs an expert to change the process. I have done some recruitment before that really helped me to take some knowledge into it and make the process better. Complex, I would also say I had written down what we're in right now, and because we reacted quickly and we took the time to think about things, we didn't go into chaos. It could have slipped into chaos to move into a mobile office, especially as we have Qatar and people who really need to be in the office. But we looked at all things and we tried out different things. We also opted for a lot of communication within the team. Who has met someone who had the virus? So we really tried out different things, and we have. Yeah, so I wanted to add, and chaos is you always mentioned that if you want innovation, that you maybe sometimes create chaos and let people jump onto new tasks they've never done before to get something out. But yeah, I think we hope to not have so much chaos in HR.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the time you invest here with us today, Lena and Michèle and all the attendants. Apologies because we are running out of time, and there were 2 questions more there, but we cannot address them. And yeah, all the recording will be available in YouTube and also in the website. Yeah, we'll stay tuned. We will publish them. Again, thanks everyone, and I think we could close the webinar.
Oh.
Thanks a lot. Stay safe. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.